The world of B2B marketing, sales and service tech is moving fast. This podcast will cut through the hype, the hidden agendas and bullshit advice in search of the truth to help you make more informed decisions. So welcome to the latest episode in our podcast, Truth, Lies and B2B Tech. You'll probably notice that I'm not joined by my wingman James this week. Instead, I've got a far better replacement in our first guest, Jennie Holmes, who's the Growth Marketing Director at Dasana. So I'm going to let Jennie talk a little bit about Dasana and her role in a second. We've worked with Jennie for a number of years. We go way back. I think I first met Jennie when she was working for a HubSpot agency, and that's where I started my journey on with HubSpot. And I think we've both been on a similar journey ever since. Jennie has worked both client side and agency side, and has got a huge wealth of experience in B2B marketing and sales, and she's always got a very strong opinion on tech. So Jennie sort of typifies the type of people that we want listening to the podcast. So we're really looking forward to this conversation. So if you want to just kick off, Jennie, by just telling us a little bit about Dasana, I think that would be a good place to start.
Yeah, Dasana is a really exciting platform. So we're on the cutting edge of prop tech and real estate. We work with global real estate teams, and what we do is we provide them with an agile real estate solution. So if you think the way that the world's changed, we don't own things, everything's on demand, and this is the workspace solution to that. So we've seen these enterprise level companies like Amazon very recently has been in the news, pulled everyone back into the office, which in theory is great until everyone needs a space for a Zoom call and there's no meeting rooms. So the flip side is that we've had this really interesting time within the workspace environment where we've had everyone at home and then everyone in the office, and actually the offices are configured for need. And what Dasana does is we provide access to the global workspace market within one unified platform. So it's an app, web app, Android, iOS, and yet you've basically got access to workspace in your pocket on demand.
Wow. So no doubt then there's a heavy reliance on tech in the job that you do.
Yeah, so I work as the Growth Marketing Director. I've been at Dasana for a year, and really it's been about tying together our systems. And as you know, the tech market, the tech stack is becoming increasingly fragmented. It's great because there's loads of choice, but the paradigm of choice is complexity. So actually making educated decisions around how your stack should be, how it should talk to each other, how you attribute across different pieces of the funnel. These problems are not new. The solution isn't as neat as we would like still. I think we probably can dig into that. So my role has been aligning the tech stack, building reporting, but also filling the funnel at the top and looking at, what channel strategies work and how things have shifted really, because I think it's a very interesting time for B2B. There's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of newness, but actually how are we pulling back to the old and what works? And a bit like the paradigm of workspaces, people want the flexibility of remote, but value the interactions in person. I think we're seeing the same shift within the B2B market of everyone values LinkedIn, but we trust in real life meetups still, and we value that close network.
Yeah, there's a lot changing. Everyone's asking similar questions. I think that's why we've launched the podcast now, because I'm old enough to see and have experienced marketing go through several different cycles. And we're certainly at the cusp of another one now, possibly the biggest ever. So I think keen to get your thoughts on what's coming, what's changing. And also, as always, when we reach this point, there's an awful lot of hype in the market. There's a lot of people with different agendas, self-serving agendas. There's quite a lot of bullshit as well. So we're really searching for the truth in this podcast. So I'm sure we'll get to that as we go through. So we've already touched on HubSpot, and I'm right that HubSpot is the platform of choice that you use at Dasana currently.
Yeah,
You've
absolutely.
got a huge amount of experience in working with HubSpot. And to get your take on how that's working for you at the moment and what it's really doing for you, and just give us a feel for what else you've got within that whole stack.
Yeah, so HubSpot is our central platform. So we use HubSpot partly as a CMS. We use it as our central CRM. We use it across our commercial teams. So it's pretty much a full funnel solution for us, right across the buyer journey. We also work really closely with partners at Asana. So we leverage HubSpot for partner relationships, which we could talk about as a separate subject because it's quite interesting how you can and can't use that for partner relationship building. And then we've been working on building up other technical solutions around that. So we use lead forensics, which is very popular in the B2B space at the current leader, not without its challenges, but it does provide some very interesting insight. Most recently, engaged Clearbit, who've been acquired by HubSpot. So that was a bit of a tactical play as well on our side, in that gives us data enhancement. It helps us reduce the length of forms. It actually also provides insight very similar to lead forensics as an added bonus. And what I'm hoping is that now they've been acquired, we're going to see a tighter integration in terms of that solution. So we use those. And then we use Intercom. So HubSpot you could use for your kind of CS piece, but we've decided to go with Intercom. But the two do integrate. So I think it's also about the beauty of HubSpot is that even if you're building your tech stack up with disparate platforms, because it's so well integrated now, there's a lot you can do there. And originally we were running our webinar series through Zoom, and again, Zoom connected really well with HubSpot in terms of teeing up workflows. And it actually, in terms of the engagement data that you can pull through into HubSpot, that was really interesting for our sales team. And, part of this, of using HubSpot and trying to build up this one universal source of truth is, attribution so hard to measure. And I like the way that HubSpot, it's not perfect, but there are ways that you can tie up your campaign attribution, especially for us with such a long sales cycle. You're looking at potentially engagements across multiple stakeholders, can be up to 2 years. So to try and work out where you're generating ROI from projects, HubSpot can be a really good tool for that.
So we've seen a lot change, certainly a lot of new announcements around HubSpot on the back of inbound. I'm not sure how much you picked up from that, but there's some fairly fundamental areas that HubSpot is clearly wedded to now as a central strategy, AI being probably the most prominent, but clearly as well, it's and has been doing so for a while. It's moving beyond marketing and sales into service. What's your sort of three or four main takeaways from what you caught inbound? I'm not sure how much you actually got to watch any of the sessions. Probably weren't, like us, fortunate to get out there, but I think that's certainly something we'll be looking to do next year, particularly now it's going to be in San Francisco. But yeah, what did you pick up from the conference?
Great question, Craig. Not a lot, because we are running our own event in San Francisco in a month. So that
Interesting.
very, very interesting. Yes, that's the reality, right? And I think maybe it's an important point to touch on is when you're working across all these platforms, you want to be up to date and you want to be able to follow what the newest thing is. But sometimes you've just got a real campaign priority that means that you can't. So there's one thing that I saw that I don't necessarily think was tied to inbound, but is really interesting for us that came up, which is around company lead scoring. So lead scoring has always been tied traditionally to a contact level. And as I mentioned, we've got a much more complicated buying process. You're looking at multi-threading. So lead scoring on a company level, especially if you can tie in any of those intent markers we're getting from either lead forensics or from Clearbit, I think that will be much more insightful for us. So I think that move, to around, I guess it enforces more of an ABM approach is quite interesting. But it seems like you might have some more insight. I'd be really interested to know, the takeaways that you thought would be valuable for the market.
Well, it's funny because you and I caught up ahead of this podcast a few weeks ago, which was before inbound, and some of the things that you talked about, you must have had a premonition because they were sort of came to the fore at the event. And I think the acquisition of Clearbit is clearly something that HubSpot's built a whole strategy around, and Breeze Intelligence has largely been formed out of that, which I think was possibly one of the most significant things from a B2B perspective. There was lots of other announcements, lots of other features and functionality that were launched, but I think Breeze Intelligence as a data enrichment tool is going to be significant. I think there was other things around form submissions and how forms are managed on websites and making those truly progressive and a lot simpler to use for the user. I think those are a couple of standouts for me. I think probably the biggest thing is I paid more attention to the investors and what they were interested in. There was a whole investor session with the powers that be at HubSpot, which I thought was really interesting. So they talked about their whole kind of new seed strategy and the wider strategy around marketing, sales and service. And that seemed to go down very well with analysts. And as a result, I think it flips the next day from a hold rating to a buy rating, which is pretty significant. So clearly whatever was said, the analysts believe in. And I think, yeah, it's interesting when you watch a conference like that, because we did take the time obviously to try and grab some of the sessions, and it's classic HubSpot style. It's very, very upbeat, very positive, and you've got to try and separate some of the hype over some of the, what really is going to be important to you. And I think AI being central to HubSpot strategy, I think was very positive, and clearly analysts thought so as well. I think there's still some room for improvement with AI. And I just wonder what your take on HubSpot's being so focused on AI moving forward, what your general view is of that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because there's two perspectives, right? One is the quality of the output that AI will help you with. But there's also this huge cybersecurity play that needs to be considered, in that you're letting AI into your CRM potentially. And, with all the best will in the world, when you dig into these governance documents, AI is still very new. And if you really look at T's and C's and what's happening, you can be pretty exposed, because you're essentially saying, okay, and the HubSpot in a broader sense will do their best. But there aren't very many guarantees, and I'm not saying it's just HubSpot. This is Intercom, this is all the big players. Data breaches are not new. AI could be catastrophic. And it could also be these slow leaks of, well, how is your CRM and your performance improving recommendations elsewhere? And where's it all being, sent to? We've seen it on a user level within Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call them. We could now be looking at similar kind of things within a B2B scale. So I think that doesn't mean you shouldn't turn it on. It doesn't mean you shouldn't leverage the tool. But I think maybe asking yourselves, especially if you're holding it like we do, any kind of ISO certification, asking yourself some pretty hard questions early on around whether this is the right tool and how you're safeguarding your future business. And this is any AI tool, right? I think like the stats are like 75% people are adopting them. How many people have been upskilled for use? There's a really interesting question there, right? And again, and the second one is about output. So if you think how many organizations are using HubSpot, and it's great, they've integrated AI content tool, right? Optimize your LinkedIn post, optimize your email subject line.
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's all ran off the same LLM. We're all going to be optimizing based on the same script, based off the same algorithm. And my concern is that this could be a mass flight towards beige, B2B beige. We'll just optimize, but optimize isn't always right. No one is going to know your ICP as well as you do. And that little creative juice, the LLMs are not good enough yet to recognize that. They don't understand cultural nuances. They don't get puns. I'm concerned that marketing could be almost demoted, rather than what AI should be, is a tool to enable us to deliver more creatively. And I think there is a big gap because we're moving at such a pace with the technology. I'm not necessarily sure that senior leadership and senior marketers have really thought about how we help a workforce take advantage of that in reality. I read a great stat around these leaders of big enterprise companies that are enabling AI throughout their workforce. They're not digital natives. They were born in the generation that they were born into. This is new technology, and that is not a criticism of them at all. But maybe we just take a hot minute before all plowing ahead.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult for a lot of organizations to do that, isn't it? Certainly if you're in HubSpot's position, they have to be ahead of the game as much as they can. They have to be embracing the latest technology, I think, and always brilliant at marketing themselves. And I think Inbound was no different. And they try to balance the call for greater use of AI with the need for human-centric content and humans being at the fore, and very much positioning AI as agents that are part of the team that are picking up the slack and doing the heavy lifting on certain things. I think there's definitely a place for that. There was a lot of talk about creativity at the event as well, but I think we're all using AI, obviously, in our own different ways. We've all got our own use cases where we think it works. I'm a massive fan of Claude. I think that works well, and I often use it if I'm starting a new task, need a bit of inspiration just to get going. That AI can really help to make things happen more quickly, to get the juices flowing. But the output is very different typically than what AI served up originally when you start to apply your own thinking to it. And there is a danger that we start to get a bit lazy when we use AI more and more. But that aside, I think where I worry about it is when we've clearly seen use cases now where you can replace human beings. So I saw something that ChatGPT have launched that it's all about voice. So you effectively can prompt the AI tool to pitch over the phone to a prospect, answer questions, answer objections, and to do so in a near perfect way, although you can still tell it's a robot. There's also, you could now get AI to do podcasts as well, which personally I don't necessarily want to sit there and watch two robots talking to each other, even if it's humans behind the script. So I think we've all got to be, like you say.
I mean, we've already seen, you're right. We've already seen AI influencers, right? Instagram, they're for a huge audience that people will sit and watch
it's
an algorithm deliver content.
Some people can't understand why you would do that. I mean, where'd you draw the line? I mean, I'm a huge football fan. I go to watch games regularly. Where do we end? Where you've got maybe 11 robots versus 11 robots that are far more skilled than humans. Is that really what you want to be using to entertain yourself?
And it's
where do we draw the line?
Yeah, and I don't think we know yet. But there's also then that, to contradict myself, there's that second wave of creativity. So I watched a motion AI company that took a Wembley football match and then using their AI motion capture, transposed it into this fictive Colosseum space environment. And that was an incredible creative use of football. Do you get the cold feet that you get when you go to a real life stadium? No. But is it something extra? Is it a new creative element that we didn't have before? Yes. So I think we're in agreement that there's definitely space for it. And like any tool, it could be used well and it can be used badly. I think my concern is just probably it's not. HubSpot had to move towards AI. It would have been odd if they'd have stood in the marketplace and said, "We don't believe in AI and we don't think this has got a future." That
would have been their death nail. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I get that. I think maybe because of how I've always worked with teams, there is a practical element of working with those marketing executives or delivering your marketing strategy and really thinking about how you use the tool, because you're being mindful around your Claude usage, right? But it's so easy to slip into, I'm short on time, I'll bash out 5 bullet points. I've ticked that box of content. I think it's, the same way that technology has made it really easy to sit on the sofa and watch 7 episodes back to back of something. So it can lead to negative behaviors. And how do then we as an industry work against that to leverage the benefits but minimize the risks?
Yeah. I suppose it brings us back to the conversation really around what is next. So we've kind of gone 10,000 miles up, starting to talk about the future of AI and, humanity as we know it, etc., which is maybe a bit too far for this podcast. That said, still very important to people. But I think if we talk about maybe something more near term, the next year or so, where are you thinking things are going to head now as a result, largely as a result of AI and what impact it's having? Do you see a fundamental shift in how we go to market?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, there's so many. I think AI as a creative tool or as a time-saving tool it's incredible. It's absolutely amazing. Like I was able to build a prospect list in a way that I couldn't have done 12 months ago, and that I could use, the LinkedIn matching and then like audience targeting to make a hyper niche audience. I just wouldn't have been able to do that before. Or when I'm looking for new creative ideas or I'm trying to find new tone, there's like the concept around creativity that nothing is net new. Actually, creative ideas tend to be two existing ideas that have been mushed together.
Yeah.
Everyone rates Bob Dylan as creative. Some of his songs are just repurposed melodies from other folk tunes. So AI is actually a great way, and I really enjoy like testing tone and concepts by mashing. I don't know what example might be like, write this in the tone of Iron Man. What that brings out won't be aligned to the ICP, but just can get you out of your own headspace, which if you're in a small team is a massively powerful tool. Because, small team working remotely, AI can be a great person to bounce ideas off.
Yeah. And I think we've got other things that are happening outside of AI, which, well, that's also related, but you've got social, you've got LinkedIn. Clearly its strategy now is to serve the army of people that want to build a personal brand on the platform.
Yeah.
And therefore a lot of the business rationale for investing in ads on LinkedIn, etc., was to drive people back to their website. And clearly, that's much harder to do now. And LinkedIn suppressing that whole strategy in favor of the personal branders. You've got search as well, is actually AI again been hugely impacted by AI snippets. So that's having an impact in terms of many businesses now having to rethink their SEO strategy longer term. So where do you see content heading, particularly with the backdrop of all these fairly fundamental changes?
Yeah, it's really interesting. In a lot of ways, I think we're just going back to the way it used to be. And it's the old HubSpot strategy. HubSpot strategy was called inbound for a reason, but that was all on the premise of delivering high value content to audience that they valued. And yes, that was anchored in SEO before anyone else did it. But that premise and that top level approach, I think, is where we're moving to now. It's just the metrics that it supports are different, because as you said, it's LinkedIn is becoming, it wants to become its own platform for influencers, for work professional influencers. So the algorithm is favoring everything internally on that platform, but then that is where you're going to have to educate your brand. And you can still do that organically. You can do it through page, you can do it through profile, you can do it through events, you can do it through articles. There's an ecosystem that's really interesting to play there. I don't think websites are dead. I think the path to get to them is probably shifted. And we're probably going to be, I would like to maybe be proved wrong, but we'll see. I would expect that what we'll see is a shift potentially towards like more branded keyword searches as the users becoming familiar with your brand either through social, probably through social or through Reddit. Like there's all these other streams that then they'll come to your, people still go to the website. Like I see at work, a massive impact from events that people, brand searches go up and volume of traffic goes up. And you can geolocalize that to where your in-person event was. And I think we'll see that from other channels. It won't be click through from social, but it will be part of that journey. But people still value a website, I think, as part of that. Like when they're, especially if you're scoping for an enterprise level solution, you will be sat round a table of decision makers and you'll be talking about solution and they will then go and look at your website. So there's loads of things like supporting documents, on email threads and being able to track that through HubSpot. But yeah, website traffic will still have a value. SEO is just going to be complex because the answers served by SEO won't be attributed to you. They'll come through Perplexity, they'll come through Claude, they'll come through GPT.
And no one knows
so
how,
strange.
no one knows how to optimize for that yet. I mean, it's really unclear.
Yeah, and when OpenAI launch their search engine, that will change again. So I also think, you could potentially be trying to build a strategy for a world that we don't know what it looks like, because I think the only certainty is uncertainty, right?
Yeah, and it won't just be, written words. It's going to be blogs, videos, audio. That's all going to come into the mix as well. So I think what you said there, I completely agree with. I don't think it will kill websites. I actually think it will do the reverse. I think it will mean that people will need to work harder on their websites because they're going to get less traffic. So they need to make sure the experience is a much better one for people that actually do arrive at their site, because it's much harder to get there. So traffic is going to be seen to be more valuable because you're going to want some own media. You don't want to farm everything out to platforms that you can't control. So I do think that organizations that just treat their website as an online brochure need to have a bit of a rethink. So they really need to be thinking about conversion and engagement and how to really raise the bar for their own experience on their website. So I do think that will change. I think we've talked before about in real life, as you call it, and the.
I mean, the fact that we have to call it in real life now.
I'm way past that. So yeah, that's probably past my sell by date or whatever. But I think the point is still important, that clearly there's going to be a move to more of that human interaction, increasingly so. We saw the impacts of COVID on that, and once COVID had thankfully reached an acceptable level, we all came flooding back to conferences and so on. So I think that's something that will change, but I still think it'll become still a key focal point for people. Do you think the same? Do you disagree?
So agree. I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think it's going to be about more than just conferences as well. So as I mentioned at Desana, we're doing, we're running our own event. I think you're going to see more of that, like highly curated chat and house rules, like
Roundtable type format.
Roundtable, which existed 10 years ago when I was at Science. Roundtables have never gone away. No. I think it's more that people are finally catching on that you can't neglect this kind of relationship. But word of mouth isn't new. Like the golf course has existed for a reason, and we need a new golf course because that's for a very specific group of people. But we trust our peers, and that's the bottom line. And whether it's B2C or B2B relationships, we have a trusted network of people, and that's the premise that LinkedIn was built in. are built on. So that's why you have these first, second, third tier connections that we're used to. But sometimes we forget that that's why they're there. Like that's the existence of every social network, was to mimic real life networks of trust. So I think it's going to be a really exciting time for B2B to think about these roundtables, but also how you merge, as we will call in real life events, but that is part of your marketing campaign now, and how do you get the most out of it and deliver value? So yes, get most out of it for you as the business, but most out of it for the people that attend your event, and how do you continue those relationships? So something that is, it's not that new, but it's starting to get more traction is, WhatsApp groups, professional WhatsApp groups are a thing. And they can be a really interesting way to tie on events that are perhaps a smaller community, because not everyone wants to have the infrastructure of community building and work on that. It's right for some businesses, and there's some really good examples in B2B. Birdie's one that's got, 3 different tiers of community groups. And I think there's a lot of businesses starting to do that really, really well. But it's always going to be back to that question, right, of what's right for your brand and what's right for your business and what's right for your resources. And how do you leverage what's up there? And how do you make the really difficult decision to say no to some things? Because time is finite. And yes, AI will give us more time in some elements, but we still cannot be on every channel and adapt to every audience. We still need to have people making these critical decisions around where we invest our time and where we think it will squeeze the most juice.
And so metrics is a I was going to say a thorny area, but I don't think it's necessarily a thorny area. A lot of marketeers and the likes have moved into a place where they're quite comfortable owning metrics and comfortable with the transparency, so people can really see how well marketing is performing and what impact it's having on the business. I think there's a lot of people that we speak to that are questioning the current metrics that marketers are measured on. So I suppose the obvious question is, fast forward to a year down the line, you're a more sophisticated organization in terms of how you go to market. What do you think people are going to be measuring marketing on? Today it's traffic, it's engagement, it's outreach, it's MQLs. Do you feel that's going to shift quite significantly, or maybe not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think there's a shift, there's a difference across businesses. Like if you talk to other, people in marketing, some of them, the shift has been predominantly on like a brand awareness focus. Others are still very SEO focused. And that's where they believe like you're really having that linear path of traffic to conversion. But it just depends on the business model as well, right? Whether you're on an e-commerce with a really large paid budget, what your metrics are going to be, or whether you're running a more
complexity of the sales process.
Yeah, and like what channels you're across. There seems to be a lot of chat around MQLs and a lot of chat around like, you've got these RevOps roles now, and how much marketing should be tied to revenue. And again, question how much this is really changing. Brands always existed for marketing, revenue driven. A lot of marketing, really good marketers have always wanted to see something on the bottom line. And you can have brand metrics and still see the needle move commercially. It's just how you've been tasked with measuring that. So I think it's this tie up with your C-suite essentially, and where marketing sits in that relationship, that could often dictate how the metrics are going to form. Because if you have a seat at the senior leadership table and you've got a linear sales process or a short sales process that could be neatly tied up to commercial revenue, then that absolutely makes sense as a metric. But if you know that that's not your buyer journey, and where are you at in your market maturity? Are you a known brand, an unknown brand? You in a category or trying to build a category? I think that's what's interesting. I feel like LinkedIn sometimes gets pulled into this hole of like, this is the way. And there isn't a way. Otherwise, it'd be really easy for everyone and we'd all be talking about the same thing. But we never have been, because my favorite thing about marketing is it's far more nuanced than that. There isn't a singular path. There are multiple. And you work out the best path for you. And then you work out how you should be measuring performance, so you're constantly improving on it. And I think that's probably a better set of questions to ask to arrive at an answer that's right for you and your organization.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very good way of looking at it. So I'm going to move to my favorite part of the podcast, which, as the title of our podcast would suggest, that we're always keen to expose any bullshit that we come across. And let's face it, there's a lot of it in B2B marketing. We've kind of given you the task of thinking about that ahead of today. So go on, hit us with it. What is the single thing that is a real bugbear of yours that you think should be called out for bullshit?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So when we spoke, it was about benchmarks. But I think I'm going to do a last minute change.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
I think it has to be about what we just touched on, which is that element of like it being a silver bullet. And I think the problem is, I'm just going to call bullshit on all these experts who are, because you're an influencer, right? On LinkedIn, and bear with me, this will have a point. You're an influencer on LinkedIn. You've got your message, you've got your brand, and you've got your secret sauce that you're selling. It feels a little bit like, to me, like, the agency days of like, we're an SEO agency, so SEO is your problem and SEO is your solution.
Yeah.
I think there is this danger of being back to this silver bullet of, whether it's the silver bullet of ABM or the silver bullet of AI or the silver bullet of RevOps or new definition of MQL. Like, there's all these people touting solutions like it's one-stop shop. And I think probably that's the largest amount of bullshit going on at the minute. But it's how we now consume media, right? It's how we consume Instagram. You've got a cucumber guy. He will sell you. He will do recipes solely on cucumber, because everyone's carving out a niche, which is wonderful. And we've been banging on about niches within an ICP for ages, but then there's that danger, right, of polarization of opinion. And I think the sweet spot lies in the grey. And maybe we need to get better about debating and discussing and working out the messy parts and not thinking that there is this silver bullet. And I don't actually see very many people within LinkedIn having kind of dialogue, really. I think there's just a lot of, this is truth, this is fact, this is how you do it. It should perhaps be more, this is work for me, and these are the challenges and the complexities. Let's have a chat. But the LinkedIn format's not designed for that. LinkedIn favors one-stop clickbait.
I think there's a few things in that to unpick. I think all bets are off now. The old way doesn't work. So naturally, you've got lots of different perspectives, mostly self-serving ones that from different people trying to now profess to understand what is needed next to be successful. And quite understandably, every marketeer is trying to figure out where to go next. But we've got clients where a lot of, the old way of working is still really effective for them and still working. So I'm always a little bit skeptical when I start hearing that everything's dead.
I was benchmarking website and I wanted to benchmark B2B websites, and there was some great guides, and they were ebooks, but that was the right format for that content. And it was really useful. They did before and after shots. Like, that served, we're back to purpose, right? Like you said, like, things aren't dead. Emails isn't dead. Like that, they've been saying that for 10 years. It's not dead.
Yeah. Email's dead, Slack's going to replace it. Yeah. It's the same across the board.
Yeah. But it's not. It's about, like, just keep going back. And this has not changed, I don't think, from your time, from my time. Like, how are you delivering purpose, and how does the person that you're targeting like to consume content? Just because some people are on TikTok doesn't mean your person is. And maybe they still got a fax machine. Maybe they're in rural France with a fax machine, and that's it to get hold of them. So I just think it's like, yeah, nothing. It's about being mindful and asking the right questions and not writing things off or getting
Not
sucked
writing
in
things
by the
off and
bright shiny.
having a skeptical mindset, I think, not just to latch on, like you say, to the next silver bullet. I think LinkedIn, it really seems to have evolved as a platform, and for me, not in a great way. And I know you've probably got mixed views on LinkedIn as well. You can see, when you've got an audience of people that follow you, then it's a great way to generate awareness and get visibility. But I think I heard a stat the other day that I think 99% of people on LinkedIn don't really contribute. And it does feel like it's a platform for people that are intent on building a personal brand, while everyone else watches on, not really understanding it and throwing in the odd like and post because they'd like to build their own personal brand, but they haven't got the kind of the fortitude, I think, to consistently show up on LinkedIn. So I think if LinkedIn launched its platform today, promoting it as a social platform for people that want to build a personal brand, I think the vast majority of people wouldn't jump on the platform. But I still do think it has its place, and it's still a viable channel because, like you say, most of your audience is going to be there in one form or another. So we can't exclude it from the mix. It's just it's difficult for companies now because it's very people centric, isn't it? LinkedIn. So you have to have individuals that are willing to really go the extra mile.
But I think there's also this opportunity for brand, especially within the B2B space. We've managed to grow quite consistently our audience and maintain a really high level of engagement. And that's through the branded company account. And we've really leveraged newsletters and events and live streams. And we do try and leverage also like senior leadership and wrap that round. But it 10% of our traffic and a significant amount of our commercial pipeline comes from our LinkedIn without BDR activity. Like someone prospecting and growing networks, like it's legitimately being organic. And I think as long as you're back to that, I'm just on repeat, you're back to like the purpose and the value that you're delivering. Because a lot of the branded accounts aren't that good. They're just like, hi, we're at stand 103 at this expo. Like if you can break out of that and think of your brand, guess the same way that you would when you're trying to build a personal brand and personal influence, and have it that way, and there's a clear brand voice and personality wrapped around it, then I think there is space for that. It's not easy, but it can work. But it's also, if there's not oversaturation in your marketplace and you're doing something interesting, like Monzo Bank is doing really well in organic content and LinkedIn. It's pitch perfect, really well executed. I'd be interested, because their subject matter is completely right for LinkedIn. It gets great engagement. I'd be interested. What I can't quite work out is how that maps through to their commercial strategy and who they're really trying to target. Maybe they've nailed it. I can't pull back that curtain,
No,
but it does show that there's space there.
Yeah, you're right, and you make a very good point. I think there are some good examples of brands that have changed their approach on LinkedIn and it's working for them. HubSpot again, they think they completely changed their social team some time ago, and I think they've gone down what they class as the unhinged approach. So a lot of their content is slightly weird, but it gets attention and it works for them. So I'm going to give you the chance to have the final word. We've talked a lot today about a lot of different things. So from HubSpot to AI to reporting and where we potentially see that going. I could probably spend another 10 minutes recapping on all the key points that we've touched on. But I think if you could leave someone who's listening to this with one thing in terms of, the real truth from all of the noise that's around B2B marketing right now, what would you leave them with?
Leave them with the basics, the very unsexy basics of listen to your customer, know your customer, work out what they want, what they're interested in, how you add value to them in terms of your product, your service, and then work that out in terms of like what content will help them on that journey. That's it. That hasn't changed at all.
No, absolutely. And a really good way to end the conversation, which I've really enjoyed. So thank you for that. Always good to chat.
I loved it too.